The sharp knock on my door at 7:30 a.m. on a Saturday wasn't just unexpected, it was unwelcome. I opened it to find Karen Miller, clipboard in hand, pearl necklace gleaming in the morning sun, standing on my porch with two other HOA board members flanking her like deputies. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "We need to discuss your boat." My 1974 Boston Whaler had been docked at my lakefront property for 3 years without issue. It was more than just a boat, it was the last connection to my father, our final project together before cancer took him. "What about my boat?" I asked, already feeling my jaw tighten. Karen raised her chin slightly. "According to HOA bylaw 17.3, no watercraft may remain visible from the main road for more than 48 hours. Your boat has been there for months. You'll need to move it to storage immediately or face daily fines starting at $100. "The boat is on my property at my dock on the water," I replied calmly. "It's not even visible from the main road unless you're specifically looking for it." Karen's smile thinned as she handed me a notice. "We've received multiple complaints. The neighborhood standards are very clear. You have until Monday to comply." As they turned to leave, I noticed Ted from the fishing club walking by, concern etched on his face. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my boat. This was Karen's latest power play in her campaign to control every aspect of our lakeside community. What Karen didn't know, what nobody except my lawyer knew, was that when I purchased my property 3 years ago, I also quietly acquired the actual lake rights from the original developer's estate. The HOA had been operating under the assumption they controlled the water access, but they were wrong. I had kept this information private, preferring peace to confrontation. But as I watched Karen march toward her next victim, clipboard ready, I knew that time was over. You know what would happen if someone owned this lake and decided who could use it? I called after her. "The Thursday night fishing club you and your husband enjoy so much could disappear overnight." She turned, confusion briefly replacing smugness. "The lake is community property, Mr. Whitmore. Perhaps you should review your homeowner's documents." I folded her notice and slipped it into my pocket. "Perhaps you should review yours. Have you ever reached that breaking point where staying quiet finally costs more than speaking up? What would you have done in my situation? Continue to keep the peace or stand your ground?" To understand why I was willing to risk neighborhood harmony over a boat, you need to know about the Whitmore family's connection to water. My father, James Whitmore, served 30 years in the Navy before opening a small marina on Lake Michigan. Those weren't just businesses to him. They were sanctuaries where people could experience the freedom only water provides. "Water doesn't care about your status or bank account," Dad would say as we repaired boat motors together. "It treats everyone the same." Growing up at that marina shaped me. Weekends weren't for video games, they were for learning how to replace propellers, fix fiberglass, and navigate by stars. When most kids dreaded helping their parents, I cherished every moment in that workshop. The smell of marine fuel and varnish, the gentle rocking beneath our feet, and Dad's patient instruction. The 1974 Boston Whaler was our final project. Dad was already sick when we started restoring it, though neither of us acknowledged how the cancer was claiming him. We worked through that summer, his strength fading as the boat came back to life. He didn't live to see it completed, but finishing it became my tribute to him. Professionally, I followed a different current. With an environmental science degree, I started as a marine biologist before transitioning to environmental consulting. My specialty became water rights and conservation. Ironic, considering my current situation. My work took me to coastal communities across the country, but I always felt like a visitor until 3 years ago. That's when Maya entered high school. After my amicable but difficult divorce, I had shared custody of our daughter, but her teenage years demanded stability. Maya inherited my love for nature and her mother's determination, a powerful combination in a 14-year-old passionate about climate action and environmental justice. "Dad, you literally save lakes for a living, but you're never home," she told me during one of our weekend visits. "I need you here, not just for holidays and scheduled custody days." Those words hit harder than any wave. When a consulting project brought me to inspect a lake in a suburban development 3 hours from my apartment, something clicked. The pristine water, the community built around it, the potential to put down roots. It felt right. What the real estate agent showed me was a modest lakefront property with good bones but dated features. What I saw was a place where Maya could have her own room decorated with her environmental activism posters, where we could launch the Boston Whaler directly from our backyard, and where I could finally stop being a visitor in my own life. The price was steep, but the previous owner had mentioned something intriguing. The original developer's estate was separately selling the actual lake rights, which the HOA had been managing through an informal arrangement. As a water rights specialist, I recognized this rare opportunity. The purchase would stretch me financially, but owning both the property and the lake would be an investment in our future. Maya was thrilled when I showed her the house. "We can monitor water quality, start a conservation program, maybe even restore the native plant species along the shore. Her enthusiasm confirmed I'd made the right choice. For 3 peaceful years, we built our life here. Maya thrived in her new school. I established a home office for consulting, and the Boston Whaler found its place at our dock, a floating memorial to my father and a bridge between generations. Until Karen knocked on my door that Saturday morning, I'd kept my lake ownership private. I preferred being a neighbor rather than a landlord. But some principles, like my father taught me, are worth standing up for. Would you have made the same choice, investing in a place with such meaning, even knowing there was an HOA involved? Lakeside Estates was once advertised as a community with character, not just characters. That description grew increasingly ironic over the years. Our neighborhood consisted of 68 homes surrounding a 12-acre lake, with prices ranging from modest to extravagant depending on proximity to water. When I moved in, I quickly learned the unwritten social geography. The North Shore featured the original, more modest homes from the 1980s development, mostly occupied by retirees and young families who valued the good school district. The South Shore, with its newer luxury builds, housed executives who commuted to the city. The East Side hosted the tennis courts and community center, while the Western Peninsula, where my home sat, remained somewhat separate, connected to the main area by a narrow causeway. This physical division mirrored our social one. The original, residents valued tradition and simplicity. The newer arrivals pushed for modernization and amenities. The HOA became the battleground where these philosophies clashed. Enter Karen Miller. 5 years ago, she moved into one of the premium South Shore properties with her husband Tom, a mild-mannered accountant, and their teenage children. Within 3 months, she joined the HOA board. Within a year, she was president. Her ascension wasn't accidental. Karen arrived with a vision of what an elite community should be, armed with business administration credentials and real estate experience. She volunteered for every committee, attended every function, and maintained meticulous records of covenant violations, often addressing them personally before they reached the board. "I just want to maintain our property values," became her catchphrase, delivered with an unwavering smile that suggested disagreement was not just unwelcome but irrational. The current board reflected the community's divided nature. There was Eleanor, a retired school counselor who'd lived here since the beginning. Her calm voice often served as the sole counterbalance to Karen's rigid enforcement. "Communities need rules," Eleanor would say, "but they need compassion more." Roger, a former military officer, embraced Karen's structured approach, carrying his violation clipboard with zealous pride. Yet neighbors whispered about how this same man who would report you for an unmowed lawn would secretly leave food for stray cats at night. Bernard, the retired corporate lawyer, provided legal perspective while subtly reminding Karen of the limits of HOA power. His favorite phrase, "Technically the board can't actually do that," earned him Karen's thinly veiled contempt. The HOA handbook had ballooned from 15 pages to 87 under Karen's leadership. New regulations governed everything from acceptable mailbox designs to proper placement of garden hoses. Most notably, water activities faced increasing restriction. The fishing club, a 30-year tradition predating the HOA, found their Thursday evening gatherings subjected to new permits. Kayakers needed registration stickers. Children's floating toys required approval for aesthetic consistency. These changes created ripples of resentment. At community meetings, attendance split between Karen's supporters, mostly South Shore residents concerned about property values, and those who remembered a time when neighbors borrowed cups of sugar without filing forms in triplicate. I generally avoided these conflicts, focusing instead on establishing my home with Maya. The occasional violation notice for excessive wildlife feeders or non-approved dock lighting seemed a small price for our lakeside sanctuary. Until, of course, the boat became the focal point of Karen's attention. Why then? What changed to put me in her crosshairs? Would you have noticed earlier that the growing restrictions were building towards something inevitable? The real trouble began 3 weeks before Karen's Saturday morning visit. The annual HOA spring inspection had just concluded, an event homeowners dreaded like tax audits. I received a notice for minor infractions, bird feeders that attracted excessive wildlife, and solar lights deemed too bright, but nothing about my boat. Then Theodore Matthews, president of the fishing club and my occasional fishing companion, approached me at the community mailboxes. "Thought you should know," Ted said, looking uncomfortable. "Karen asked the board to review water vessel regulations. She specifically mentioned your whaler." "Why? It's been there for 3 years." Ted shifted his weight. "Her son Brian wants to join the junior sailing program, but they don't have dock space at their house. She's been eyeing your location." This explained everything. Karen's property, while impressive, sat on a shallow cove unsuitable for larger boats. Mine occupied one of the deepest water access points, perfect for launching boats. I decided to be proactive. The next day, I requested a meeting with Karen at the community center. "I understand there might be concerns about my boat," I began. Karen's smile never wavered. Not concerns, Mr. Whitmore. Violations. The covenant clearly states that watercraft visible from community areas must comply with aesthetic standards. Your vintage vessel doesn't meet them. The covenant says boats must be maintained in good condition, which mine is. There's nothing about age or style. She slid a paper across the table, a proposed amendment to the water regulations, already signed by Roger and awaiting full board approval. It specified vessels must be manufactured within the last 15 years and maintain a modern appearance consistent with community standards. This hasn't been approved yet, I pointed out. It's a formality. The board votes next week. I attempted compromise. I could install a boat lift to raise it higher when not in use, or maybe add a decorative cover. That doesn't address the fundamental issue, Karen replied. Your boat simply doesn't fit our community image. And if I refuse to remove it? Daily fines, followed by a lien if necessary. The HOA has considerable enforcement powers. 2 days later, I attended the board meeting where the amendment was discussed. Eleanor questioned whether retroactively applying new standards was fair. Bernard mentioned potential legal challenges. Roger enthusiastically supported modernizing our waterfront. When allowed to speak, I explained the boat's personal significance and my willingness to compromise. Karen interrupted. Personal attachments don't override community standards. The amendment passed 3-2, with Karen breaking the tie. I had 14 days to comply. That's when I contacted my attorney. I had avoided revealing my lake ownership to prevent community friction, but Karen's power play forced my hand. The boat wasn't just about memories. It represented a principle. How far should we let others control our lives and properties? If you own something precious that violated no existing rules, would you surrender it because someone rewrote those rules for their personal benefit? Where would you draw the line? News travels quickly in small communities. By Monday morning, everyone knew about the boat dispute. What began as a seemingly minor conflict between one homeowner and the HOA transformed into something much larger. Ted Matthews called an emergency meeting of the Lakeside Fishing Club, which had existed since before the development was built. 15 members gathered at the community center, their faces reflecting concern beyond just my situation. This isn't just about Alex's boat, Ted explained to the group. If they can retroactively change rules to target specific property, none of our traditions are safe. Next, they'll ban our fishing tournaments or limit lake access hours. The fishing club, primarily original residents from the North Shore, unanimously voted to support me. They drafted a petition opposing the new amendment, gathering signatures door to door. This grassroots resistance surprised Karen, who had expected my isolated compliance. Meanwhile, I consulted with my attorney, who confirmed what I already knew. My ownership of the lake gave me final authority over its use. The documentation was clear, though it had never been publicly recorded in community discussions. You could end all water activities with a single notice, my attorney explained. The HOA has been operating on assumed authority for years. That's not what I want, I replied. I just want to keep my boat where it is. Then use this as leverage, not a sledgehammer. At home, Maya became my strongest ally. At 14, she understood the principle at stake better than many adults. Dad, you always taught me to stand up for what's right, she said one evening as we sat on our dock, watching the sunset reflect off the disputed Boston whaler. This isn't about a boat anymore. It's about someone changing rules to get what they want. Her perspective gave me clarity. When did you get so wise? She smiled. Mom says I got your stubbornness and her common sense. As signatures on the petition grew, the community fractured along predictable lines. North Shore residents, many longtime fishing club members, supported me. South Shore residents, aligned with Karen's vision of an exclusive community, backed the HOA. Those in the middle found themselves pressured to choose sides. Neighborhood gatherings became tense. The community pool fell silent when certain combinations of neighbors arrived. Children who once played together were kept separate by their parents' newfound rivalries. Karen responded by escalating enforcement across the board. Suddenly, violation notices appeared for infractions long ignored. Unapproved bird baths, wind chimes not on the approved list, garden borders 2 inches too high. This punitive approach backfired, pushing more residents toward the petition. The breaking point came at the monthly HOA meeting. The room was packed, with people standing against walls. When public comments opened, Ted presented the petition with 42 signatures, representing over 60% of homeowners. We request the board rescind the new amendment and return to collaborative governance, Ted stated firmly. Karen dismissed the petition. The board has already voted. The amendment stands. Eleanor spoke up. Perhaps we should reconsider. This level of community opposition. Opposition doesn't change the rules, Karen interrupted. The board's decision is final unless legally challenged. Bernard, the retired lawyer, cleared his throat. Actually, there are provisions for membership overrides with a 2/3 majority. Which they don't have, Karen countered. The room erupted in angry voices. Accusations flew. Decades-old friendships cracked under the strain of choosing sides. In that chaotic moment, I realized we had reached the point of no return. Karen had pushed her authority too far, and the community was paying the price. The time for quiet compromise had ended. The next day would bring my lake ownership revelation, and everything would change. Have you ever witnessed a community torn apart by someone who couldn't recognize when to stop pushing? What would you do if you held the power to end such a conflict? The morning after the contentious HOA meeting, I received a certified letter containing a $500 fine for continued noncompliance, and a notice that a contractor would remove my boat within 72 hours at my expense. That was it. The final boundary crossed. I emailed every homeowner in Lakeside Estates. Emergency community meeting, 7 p.m. tonight, Community Center. Topic: the future of lake access. Attendance strongly recommended. By 6:45, the room was filled beyond capacity. Karen arrived last, flanked by Roger and 2 other supporters, her expression a mixture of annoyance and curiosity. She hadn't authorized this meeting, which already undermined her authority. At exactly 7 o'clock, I stood at the front, my attorney beside me with a portfolio of documents. Thank you all for coming, I began. For 3 years, I've been your neighbor, sharing this beautiful lake and community. Many of you know me as the environmental consultant with the old boat that's become the center of recent controversy. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen straightened in her seat. What you don't know is that when I purchased my property, I also separately acquired something else, the complete ownership rights to the lake itself. The room fell silent. My attorney displayed the first document on the projector, the original deed and transfer papers. The developer who built Lakeside Estates retained ownership of the actual water body. When his estate was settled, these rights were sold separately from the surrounding properties. I purchased them legally and completely. Karen shot to her feet. That's impossible. The HOA has managed the lake for decades. By informal arrangement only, my attorney explained. The HOA was granted management privileges by the previous owner, revocable at any time by the actual deed holder, who is now Mr. Whitmore. I displayed the next document, a comprehensive water rights analysis. As the legal owner of this body of water, I have sole authority to determine access, usage rules, and privileges. This includes the right to restrict fishing, boating, swimming, or any activity on or in the water. The room exploded with voices. Shock. Disbelief. Questions fired from every direction. Ted from the fishing club looked stunned. Alex, what does this mean for us? That depends, I replied, looking directly at Karen. I've always wanted this lake to be a community resource. I never planned to restrict access or enforce unreasonable rules. Bernard the lawyer studied the documents, nodding slowly. These appear legitimate. The HOA has been operating under assumed authority. Karen's face flushed as she realized the ground shifting beneath her. The power she had wielded so confidently was suddenly vapor. Effective immediately, I continued when the noise subsided. I am implementing the following changes. First, all current HOA regulations regarding lake usage are suspended pending review. Second, I am temporarily suspending the fishing club's lake access privileges. Gasps from the fishing club members, my strongest allies. This suspension will remain in effect until the HOA board rescinds the amendment targeting my boat and agrees to a new cooperative framework for community governance, one that respects property rights and requires homeowner approval for significant changes. Karen's voice cut through the chaos. You can't just hold the community hostage. I'm not, I replied calmly. I'm demonstrating what actual overreach looks like. You changed rules to target my property. I'm showing what could happen if I did the same. Maya, sitting in the front row, gave me a subtle thumbs up. Eleanor stood. Perhaps we should adjourn and reconvene when emotions aren't so high. As people filed out, the community had visibly realigned. Karen stood isolated, her power structure collapsed. Ted and the fishing club members huddled, processing their unexpected position as leverage. And I remained at the front, documents in hand, feeling the weight of what I'd done. Power had shifted. The question remained, would it lead to healing or deeper division? The 48 hours following my revelation transformed our community. Text messages flooded my phone, some supportive, others accusatory. Neighbors who had never spoken now huddled in driveways, discussing water rights law and property boundaries. Local news caught wind of the story, with one outlet dubbing it the Battle of Lakeside. For the fishing club members, my temporary ban created a complicated position. They supported my stand against HOA overreach, but found themselves collateral damage. Ted called me the morning after the meeting. We understand why you did it, he said. But Thursday's fishing tournament has been planned for months. Some members are traveling from out of state. I know, I replied. That's precisely why it creates effective leverage. But I'm not the one who needs to budge. Karen's initial reaction was predictable, denial followed by attempts to reassert control. She consulted 3 separate attorneys, all confirming my legal standing. By day 3, reality had set in. I watched from my window as she sat alone on her back patio for hours, staring at the water she no longer commanded. The unexpected came on day 4. A knock at my door revealed Karen standing alone, without her clipboard or pearl necklace. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual authority. Over coffee at my kitchen table, I saw a different person emerge. Karen had moved to Lakeside Estates after her husband's business failed in their previous community. Her rigid rule enforcement wasn't just about property values. It was a desperate attempt to create stability in a life that had spun out of control. "I thought if I could maintain perfect order here, everything else would fall into place," she admitted. "I never considered how it affected others." "Control is an illusion," I told her. "My father taught me that on the water. You plan, prepare, and adapt, but you never truly control what comes next." Despite this moment of understanding, my feelings remained mixed. The satisfaction of standing my ground was tainted by the community fractures I'd helped deepen. Maya noticed my conflict. "You did what you had to do," she reassured me. "But now comes the harder part, fixing what's broken." 1 week after the revelation, Eleanor organized a community reset, gathering at the lakefront park. Nearly every household attended. The atmosphere was tense, but tinged with possibility. Eleanor had prepared a simple framework. Each speaker got 3 minutes without interruption. People expressed anger, disappointment, and hope. Bernard presented a draft for new governance, a lake usage committee with elected representatives from different neighborhood sections, working alongside a restructured HOA board with limited amendment powers. Karen spoke last. "I moved here seeking perfection and imposed my vision on everyone. I apologize for that approach and for targeting Alex's boat for personal reasons." When my turn came, I announced the immediate lifting of the fishing club ban and proposed a comprehensive lake access plan that preserved traditional activities while implementing reasonable conservation measures. "This lake belongs to all of us," I concluded. "My legal ownership shouldn't mean I dictate its use any more than the HOA should. We need balance, not control." The proposal passed with overwhelming support. Karen accepted a position on the Conservation Committee, where her organizational skills found positive application. Roger turned his inspection zeal toward monitoring water quality. The fishing club invited new members from all shores. My boat remained at its dock, now joined by Brian Miller's small sailboat, which Karen had finally purchased for her son. Sometimes they even asked to use the whaler for fishing lessons. Communities, like boats on water, find their balance through movement, not rigidity. The path forward wasn't perfect, but it was ours, together. Have you found that sometimes the biggest disputes can lead to the most meaningful improvements in a community? 3 months after our community reset, I sat on my dock watching the sunset reflect off the Boston Whaler. Maya joined me, homework finished for the evening. "You know what's weird, Dad?" she said. "Everyone seems happier now than before all this happened." She was right. The neighborhood had found a new equilibrium. The Lake Usage Committee met monthly, with rotating chairs and transparent processes. The fishing club had expanded to include youth programs. Even property values had increased, as prospective buyers appreciated our governance model. Karen and I maintained a respectful relationship. We weren't friends, but we had something more valuable, mutual understanding. She still organized community events with impressive efficiency, but now focused on inclusion rather than enforcement. My revelation about owning the lake could have driven our community further apart. Instead, it forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about power, control, and what makes a neighborhood worth living in. I learned several lessons through this experience. First, avoidance rarely solves problems, it merely postpones them. My 3 years of silence about lake ownership contributed to the eventual conflict. Second, principles matter, but so does compassion. Standing firm on keeping my boat wasn't just about winning. It was about honoring what mattered while finding solutions everyone could accept. Third, communities thrive on balance, between rules and freedom, tradition and progress, individual rights and collective needs. When that balance tips too far in any direction, correction becomes inevitable. Perhaps most importantly, I realized that power used wisely isn't about control. It's about creating space for everyone to belong. The old Boston Whaler still sits at my dock, now joined by other boats of various ages and designs. Sometimes when I take it out, I feel my father's presence and imagine him nodding approval, not just at how I maintained his boat, but at how I stood my ground while helping rebuild what was broken. If you found yourself in a similar situation, caught between honoring what matters to you and maintaining community harmony, what would you do? Where would you draw your line in the sand? And how might you transform conflict into something constructive rather than destructive? Thank you for joining me on this journey through troubled waters to calmer shores.